of Kittens and Broken Things, Chapter 60. Kara's arrival back on the Normandy was a physical and emotional relief in so many ways. When they'd traveled to Palaven, she'd been apprehensive and tattered. Guilty, she'd pushed Garrus to a breaking point. That Garrus and Senar had both joined forces to express how stubborn and unreasonable she was. It was nice to see them working together, but against her or for her, she couldn't decide. She had fewer secrets at this moment than she'd held since she was 16 years old. She had never wanted to keep the rest so desperately because of the reception of her secrets. She wanted to hold them to her tight, curl into the metaphoric fetal position, and protect everything remaining. She had to become accustomed to excruciatingly tender vulnerability after having lived so long with natural camouflage. Palaven had been immersive and educational. She knew more about Garrus, and that was all good. She knew more about Senar, and that was a delicate balance of power and privilege. She'd grown closer to Yesed, and that rubbed raw in the excruciatingly tender and vulnerable way of responsibility that Yesed forgave, but she could not forgive in herself. She was endlessly grateful and touched that Russ took on Yesed's therapy. Kara was not strong enough to support Yesed's full weight, metaphorically or literally. She'd certainly learned that Garrus's family was powerful, fiercely loyal, and community-minded, constant fireworks of events and honors, pageantry in the Vicarian blue that best represented the color of Turian blood. She had been able to navigate, she had been able to appear cool and calm, and she really had not hated, but been averse to every moment of it. Garrus understanding that and protecting her from it by abbreviating their appearances, speaking for them both, navigating for her. He was so good at it. He was extraordinary. She was so proud. And she never wanted to go through that again. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't incompetent. She understood it. She degraded in that environment emotionally and intellectually in the same way she would degrade physically if she stepped outside and took full radiation damage. Bravery or repeated exposure would not result in anything other than more damage taken. It would not result in learning how to tolerate or overcome it. She'd only be forced into lying that it didn't hurt and hope she could keep the damage to herself. She had no idea how to change her scent, though, and lying to Garrus had never been easy or effective except in a short-term sense. Fortunately, he knew her well enough to know even before they got there that there was no chance she'd live, or that he'd let her live, on Palaven. The sense of Turian ego and self-aggrandizement set her on edge. Her hypervigilance was in overdrive, aware of every pair of eyes, trying to parse every word, every expression. The problem wasn't that she couldn't parse those words or expressions. The problem was that she did understand the slights, subtext, and the obsequious appeals to power that demanded something from Garrus and her in every moment and all future moments. She was simultaneously impatient with the fussing and waste of time spent on the hammering message of "We're number one" that was a large percentage of all Turian interactions, and wary of all the opportunities and angles that were available to strike. Her short red head seemed to be a conspicuously out of place and easy to hit center of a bullseye. Standing next to Garrus in the context of his family, she didn't think about war. She thought about who they could be after the war. If they stayed here, they'd be at war forever. She needed it to end. In theory, she was a person that could be plugged into all circumstances and have her adapt to them. She could. She did, but because it was for Garrus, because it was personal, it dragged at her like quicksand. She was harming by trying to escape. She had no intention of allowing the slights, subtext, or future needs pull her off course. She had to jettison them as quickly as possible, get back to who she needed to be, return to self-directed space that correctly assessed self-worth, resources, intent, and capability without pumping them up with rhetoric. She honored the Turian people. She did. She disagreed with them often and could barely coexist in their aggressively presented space. But she needed them. That created guilt. She was caught between waves of impatience and then trying to counter that by looking around the room and wondering how many of the Turians vowing honor and death in every gesture would, in fact, be dead soon. She wished all of these people spent more time doing real work instead of discussing the traditional aura of perfection that was the Turian ideal or trying to make her out to be some bulletproof and impervious spirit of war. Maybe the guilt also meant she'd condemned Garrus to this instead of a life together, and all the times he'd asked to be able to go with her. More guilt. Much more guilt. Then she'd remember how very good he was at it, what a difference he'd made, and yes, it all led to guilt. Much more guilt. She was a small human woman with a gift for strategy and stubborn, and she had to bite the inside of her lip so often to stop from saying it, to correct someone from overblown impression of her talent, to smile and nod and agree that the walls listened, and her victory was fated. It would be easy if the Alliance had sent her in for a diplomatic mission. That she could manage. She'd be professional. She'd be paid. She'd have a mission and a purpose. She could lie and be camouflaged and feel absolutely no guilt about that. But here the purpose was personal, and she was good at it, but she didn't like that she left gatherings with Garrus physically and emotionally propping her up. She could not live a life surrounded by Turians. There was no place for solitude, and in Turian culture, seeking solitude seemed to be something bordering on mental illness requiring community intervention. She couldn't step outside for a walk without volunteer companions. She would end up a default prisoner in one set of rooms, the same way she ended up isolated in her cabin on the Normandy. She really wanted to get work done, and had felt she'd wasted enough time. She knew it wasn't a waste. Garrus leveraged every moment between parsing her for her exhaustion, but it was impossible to accommodate her style amid the madless walls that listened and judged, the madless citizens that listened and judged, and above all, her brain listening and judging, and not liking what she saw or heard, wanting to bolt to her verse hole every moment. Aware she couldn't live in her hole anymore, aware Garrus would never be able to meet her there, that she couldn't meet him in the center of his madness. She was exhausted and longing for the days where they found a place, some place, any place, where they could coexist without losing pieces of themselves to psychic self-surgery in order to fit. For the moment it felt clean to draw clear boundaries, have a cabin where she could center and think, where she belonged to herself and was not incrementally dissected for what parts belonged to the hierarchy. She was too tired to count all the good things that partnership, bond, and an ability to communicate with others had brought her. Right now she wanted solitude, and the clean lines of Geth thought, her mind able to embrace strategy again with clarity. She didn't talk to the denizens of her cabin. She felt compressed and wanting to keep her thoughts to herself. She trusted Edie, she trusted Garrus, she trusted Sinar, she really did. She felt exposed. And here she could not tell if she felt she'd made a strategic mistake already or was about to, or if she hadn't and she was only experiencing culture shock and unaccustomed social pressures that translated into frustration and anxiety, mimicking the signals she'd experience if she felt she'd made or was about to make a mistake. She needed to sort it all out, having spent a life where social pressures were all part of the same game, and she slid through them not without injury, but without exposed weakness. Mostly. Garrus saw through her. Sennar saw through her. She had never been as good as she thought she was. She needed to be better. Picnic, Sooth, and Sennar would arrive, and although the picnic idea was in fact ridiculous, she was so squeezed empty of the ridiculous that she needed an influx of silly to counter the fact that they were discussing the extermination of sentient life with a synthetic life form that what? She was having trouble categorizing. She didn't want to think ill of Sooth, but of course there was so much to worry about. Any trick she might have to parse psychological intent in a sentient creature was gone. All her instincts regarding behavior were missing because Geth had no micro-expressions or vocal cues that could be counted upon. Sooth did not glow. That was not much of a concern. Nobody at the moment glowed except for Garrus and Sennar. They persisted in glowing. And otherwise, all she knew was that some parts of Sooth glowed. Parts of what she said glowed. That internal vibration of a path. Sooth was important. The way forward was with her. Russ did not glow. Yesed did not glow. She wanted to move forward, having discovered that forcibly resting on laurels and having more heaped upon her at every moment made her edgy and miserable. Russ helped Yesed out with his therapy, grateful for the opportunity. Yesed was a great kid, and to be doing something helpful and clean for a young man who spent a lot of time being angry at his family and experiencing loss helped Russ feel he definitely arrived at authoritative adulthood with the ability to give something back. He had his paint. He had his family. Yesed was part of it. They had enough in common that it was all around therapeutic. Sennar was often present, but today was conspicuous in a subtle way. The man usually wasn't seen if he didn't want to be seen, but today he wanted Russ's attention. Oh boy. Russ stuck around until he and Sennar were given an opportunity of privacy. One more thing Sennar didn't want to say within Edie's earshot, no doubt. He began with, I wish to thank you for your assistance with Yesed. His therapy has gone well. He's a great kid. He could beat us both at that foot race right about now. He will remain here. That's good news. You know, every time you come talk to me, it's bad news, so don't keep me in suspense. Sennar's mouth twisted into what looked like a self-deprecating smile. I have never been an emissary for good news, I am afraid. The pattern will hold true, as we will be serving on the same squad. I wish to share a concern with you. I have not told Garrus. I have not told Lal. I believe when I tell you why, you'll understand. If you wish to tell Garrus, I understand. I hope that you do not. As before, my concern is squad cohesion and mission completion. Lal Shepard is an extraordinary tactician. She has one flaw in her choices that does not, will not change with repetition. She's crazy? Sennar shook his head. Not necessarily a drawback. Russ nodded as though that made sense and guessed again. Oh, I know. She's a fucking martyr. Sennar nodded. Yes. Garrus knows this and seeks to keep her alive. That is not news to him. It dominates his thoughts and fears. He does not fear that I will kill her, only that I will take her. There is likely nothing I can do to relieve that fear in him if my actions thus far have not. Had I wished to take her, I would have done so. I believe he thinks I will become more desperate and devoted, and I will reach the point where I will break and take her. I cannot relieve that fear through words. only through my actions. It is a natural response of a bondmate, and one I do not necessarily wish to relieve if it results in him protecting her. Unfortunately, the more harmless I appear, the less likely he would be to believe that is my intention. I do not believe speaking to her of it will change her nature, but it might make her wary of our obedience. Speaking to Garrus about this would not change his behavior in battle, but might make him feel guilty, or change his behavior as her bondmate in such a way that she becomes suspicious and perhaps paranoid, which I wish to spare her. Martyrdom is one of her strengths in that she is not afraid to die, but as always, a strength can become a weakness under the wrong circumstances, and we encounter the wrong circumstances with tedious regularity. She is extraordinary at gameplay, but she can lose sight of one tenet of any game that is being played. She can pursue her goal relentlessly. She can formulate and execute plans to press forward. When it comes to the end game or a choice where she has only seconds to decide, her flaw comes into sharp relief. In human chess, one wins the game by taking the king. In Drelponifa, one wins the game by taking the doyen. Every game has a goal. The only game Commander Shepard loses, and has lost repeatedly, is when she is the target, when she is the goal, when she is on the board as the piece. She lost her life to collectors. Garrus took bond without consent, and she abided by and defended his choice. She lost certain aspects of her will and autonomy to Garrus or to me when we pressed upon her to do so. She will sacrifice herself given a choice to make, and that is more likely if the choice must be made in a brief amount of time. Unfortunately for the greater galaxy, a king or a doyen cannot afford to think that way. When they are lost, the game is lost. Russ jutted his jaw. If you think I'd let her die because I want Garrus. Sinar shook his head. No, I do not. You and I have some things in common, and I wish to point out and reinforce the positive we can contribute as supporting pieces. You can perhaps believe me, where Garrus would not, because you have been forced in some ways into the same position. You would die for Garrus, therefore you would die for her. You would extend his will, and his will belongs to her, as his Ava. I would die for Lal. Believe it or not, I would also die for you. I would also die for Garrus. Commander Lal Shepard, Counselor Garrus Vakarian, Spectre Hamoris Vakarian, mean more to the galaxy at large than Spectre Sanar Tuelon. I am a valuable piece, but less valuable than all others in the proposed squad of 4. I do not deny that I want Lal, but I owe Garrus my son's life. I do wish to defeat Reapers to permit Yased's continued life in safety in the clan that honors him. I cannot take her. I cannot kill Garrus or allow Garrus to die. I must see the mission through to the end. I must see her will to the end, or I lose any sense of rightness I am attempting to attain. Beyond metaphoric gain or loss, the literal loss would be Yased's life and potential future. I do not believe that anybody has cause to doubt that I want him to survive and thrive. I cannot risk that by subverting her mission. If I take her for myself, I lose my son. If I take her for myself, I lose her in every sense that has meaning. I am not interested in Commander Lal Shepard's contempt or the failure of her mission. Beyond Yased being honored by his new family, I do have one goal that everyone will believe I am motivated to reach. Keep her alive at all costs. Whether or not you believe me, you can uniquely see why what I want in an extended relationship with her may not be attainable, but what I already have is worthy of preservation. You are Garrus's best friend and confidant, an exception to many rules and expectations, and regardless of whether or not you or Garrus could be bondmates in some ideal world, what you have is real. Your self-respect, Spectre status, Fresh Vicarian paint and family are not things you would risk. I am Lal Shepard's closest confidant and partner in formulating strategy. She trusts me. She needs me. I contribute to her mission, and she and Garrus have legitimized my name, given me my life and my son the safest haven in the storm, as can be arranged. I would not risk that. My training was as an assassin, not as a thief, and I will use my training to keep her alive. You and I can never be the cause of their deaths through omission or commission, or we would always have to live with the suspicion that we allowed their deaths for personal and selfish reasons. You and I must be above and beyond reproach, or we lose not only what fantasies we harbor, but what real benefits we already experience. Lal Shepard cannot sacrifice herself. I am certain Garrus would not allow it, and needs no convincing to behave in a way that is his nature and is his right as bondmate. I am certain I would not allow her to sacrifice herself. I wish to be certain you will not allow it, not only for your own reasons, but to protect the one blind spot she possesses that we must compensate for individually and as a team. You want me to mutiny against Commander Shepard? Yes. In this case, I wish for it to appear to be less in the way of coordinated mutiny and more in the way of choices made in a moment, not premeditated, but instinctual. Choices made as hers are made, on the ground, in the face of changing circumstance and stress. Situational mutiny that can be defended in every case as good strategic intent in service of the further goal of the war, being well aware our commander is a necessary asset to defend. In moments of choice, she sees herself as a pawn, worthy of sacrifice. We must remind her of her value. We must see it for her. If she appears to do as history teaches us she inevitably does, I wish to be certain all three of those she relies upon most will be willing to sacrifice themselves in her place, or rescue her from whatever impulse of martyrdom resulted in her exchanging her life for her pilot's life. She is prone. We must be aware. We must have solidarity, but appear to have come to the conclusion each on our own. We must not present any intent of conspiracy or mutiny, but prevent her death in each and every situation that may arise that she feels demands it. And if I get booted off the squad? She will bring me and Garrus with her by default, each in our own ways having earned or demanded it of her. I will attempt to influence her as much as possible to include you on missions, to advocate for you if necessary, but I do not believe that it will be necessary, based upon her past treatment of you and the purpose you serve. She will bring you because she wants you to watch over Garrus, as you always have. You relieve her of the need to care for Garrus and free her to concern herself with her mission. Any concern that I might kill him or take her is mitigated for both of them by your presence. Ideally, in a squad composed of the four of us, her eyes are on the mission and internal dynamics of the squad are maintained by three balancing presences. On the surface, there is a reinforcing symmetry of self-interest. Shepard watches out for the mission. Garrus watches out for her. You watch out for Garrus. I watch out for her execution of mission strategy for flaws. That is how she will see it. I wish to permit her to believe we are watching each other, but in truth, I wish for us all to be watching her, executing mission where necessary and unburdened by mistrust in each other's motives. You are an indispensable element of what she needs, protection for her bondmate and unmatched biotic and physical strength. You can disagree with her and have done so without damaging your professional relationship in ways that Garrus or I cannot, because it would be interpreted as personal and not professional. It is most likely that if you save her life, she will not remove you from the squad if you justify your actions. I can help with that. Above all, do not doubt what you do. Never apologize. Save her. Feel free to be angry, to physically intimidate her in the moment. Not with violence, but with the force of your concern for the mission and her survival being key to its success. I will support you and attempt to convince her as well, as I am sure will Garrus. She will find it difficult to justify suicidal actions, with 3 of us denying her that avenue. Given time and distance from the mutiny, she will have a tendency to reassert her martyrdom in a different direction. She is likely to insist that her action was the only way to accomplish a goal, and I would suggest some version of, "You are Commander Shepard, you will find another way," to counter her immediate insistence upon her denied path. It is possible we get taken off the squad one by one for insubordination, but that means that each of us have kept her from doing something where she sacrifices herself 3 times. We must all reinforce that her authority is paramount until or unless that authority results in her death. Wherever possible, we must all block that intent and discover reasons why we were right. 3 times. Saving Cerberus, 12 billion credits. Exactly, and only 3 times. Unless we can leverage those instances into making her realize she has a team that has their own value and their own judgment. Garrus is a counselor, and you and I are specters. She must deal with us differently than she would direct subordinates. With all 3 of us supporting your action, it is very likely she would forgive and understand, and perhaps begin to compensate for her rash choices. If not, there is little to be done. There are no others that would countermand her orders. There are also no others that can carry out her orders as well. She would have to abandon a bondmate and 2 specters who know her well and have a track record of unquestioned obedience and success when her orders do not involve her death, in favor of other squad mates with less experience and lessened confidence on her part. It is likely she would not choose to do that. Her martyrdom cuts both ways for her. She would not allow herself to choose less capable squad mates, compromising the mission she treasures. It is a near impossibility with Garrus on the ship that she would remove him from the squad. If she brings Garrus, she would wish to bring you to protect him. I wish to remove any hesitation from your actions and grant authority to any choice that may appear to be mutiny, but is in fact an interventional rescue of the most important asset in the war. It may never happen that the opportunity arises, but if it does, you are not alone, and you need not fear my intervention, can count upon my support. I do not wish for you to see me as an obstacle to your goals, or believe that I plot Garrus's death. Here we share mutual self-interest, supporting the mission and the commander, except in those instances when the commander becomes the mission. Squad cohesion, huh? Squad cohesion that hopefully results in defeating our enemies and retaining and protecting our loved ones. Perhaps not at our sides. But if that is not what fate allows, then we keep them alive and together, and we console ourselves that we are, in fact, good people who will preserve life, 2 particular lives at all costs to ourselves. I prioritize Lal for excellent reasons, but I would give my life for Garrus as well, and for you. I wish for you to have faith in that. Yeah, it might work for me to be able to call her on some of her crazy bullshit. She must look forward and not back. Her attention must not be upon us but upon her goal, and we must protect her. All right. This could just be you setting me up to die or get booted off the squad. Of course it could. The only consolation being if I wished you dead or gone. Both of those things I can or could have done on my own without your assistance or permission. You guys give me a headache. My apologies. Perhaps consider that Garrus would be forever grateful to you for saving her life. That part doesn't suck, except where it obviously does. Spectres must make difficult choices. No shit. Spirits, you can have her. You deserve each other. That is the hope. Sennar took a carefully packed basket and a shuttle to the Normandy, relieved to be back on the ship. It was a rarefied privilege. Kara and Sooth were already arranged on a blanket on the floor, seemingly not having been there for long. Kara waved at him and returned to unpacking a basket that looked thematically mechanical. Sooth was trying to sit awkwardly with Quarian-shaped legs on the bright teal blanket. Kara was unpacking batteries, charging stations, and batteries. Kara said, Sennar and I have food, so I was wondering. Didn't seem fair for you to not have anything, so I brought these. Does charging from different sources make any difference in personal sensation? Sooth's hood plates wavered, and Sennar believed the answer was not going to be no, regardless of Sooth's experience of recharging. Kara set the recharging station ceremoniously out on plates in front of the Geth like a place setting. I brought NiCad, lithium-ion, and Mass Effect stations, just in case. Wait, will you recharge in public? Is that a Geth thing? Am I being insensitive? More wavering of the plates, and Sennar was fascinated, sitting down and carefully opening the basket, which contained carousel for a visit, helpfully pre-envenomed so she would not yowl through the shuttle ride. Sennar leaned in, collected a happy squeak, and kissed to the frill as he transferred the boneless cat to Kara's lap. He watched fascinated as Sooth sorted through what was expected and produced a coiled extension to plug into the stations. After a squeal and carousel being put back in his lap, Kara went searching for adapters she'd found, just in case, and Sooth looked at him as though Sennar would be able to explain what was going on. Sennar smiled at clear Geth panic and said, She will be happy with whatever you decide. Do not worry. Kara came back, scooped carousel back up, set a handful of adapters like utensils on the sides of the plates, and Sooth plugged herself dutifully into the first battery. What do you think? Anything? Sooth said, That is good. Try the other ones. Sooth's plates wavered, and she looked briefly again at Sennar, who nodded, poured Silifed juice for himself and for Kara, who spared him a grateful grin. He was thoroughly happy with his immediate life choices. Yes, there would be wonderful uses for the teal blanket in fantasy, but for now, an envenomed cat, a giggling Kara, and Sooth slowly plugging and unplugging herself from different battery sources at the rate the Kara switched from tart to cookie to juice, and saying a thoroughly confused was more than enough. Sennar found himself smiling and relaxing, Kara after the few minutes of eating saying, Okay, so what do we do? I can't wait to find out what we're gonna do. Kara reached up a hand to Sooth, who met that hand with hers and said, Hi, 128.